welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted as always to be joined by Danny. We were in preview mode for a lightweight contest taking place in Las Vegas on the 25th of January between massive prospect, if you still want to call him a prospect, Andy Cruz, taking on Omar Salcido Gomez, who has a record of 20-1. Before we go any further, please do subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. We've got all sorts of content, whether it be fighter interviews, fight previews like this video, final predictions, and of course, yeah, interviews at press conferences, weigh-ins, all that sort of stuff. Danny, good to be joined by you. I think Andy Cruz obviously only 4-0, so it's weird to talk to. It's weird to talk to him as if he is a prospect. But yeah, looking forward to seeing him. He's entertained so far as a pro. My first question to you, Danny, is how much has he impressed you? Like, I know you kind of, one thing we've got in common, we're both kind of night owls. We both kind of stay up for these American cards, which you need to do if you want to watch Andy Cruz live here in the UK. How much has he impressed you in the 4 pro fights that he's had?
You can't not be impressed by the obvious skills he had. It's like at times I feel that I've never seen, certainly not many fighters, with the footwork, how elusive he was in those first few fights. But that was always going to be the case. But I think it was his last fight I was sort of the most impressed because it was a proper fight at times against Antonio Moran, who's operated at a good level, very tough. And he had his chin checked in that fight. It was actually his legs sort of gone briefly and came through that and, forced the stoppage. And it's always good when you see a fighter with the obvious skills of Andy Cruz because there's a couple of times in his earlier fights where it looked like he was coasting a bit, and I hate that. It's so boring to watch, as skillful as someone can be when a fighter's level is above their opponents and doesn't seem to have any urgency to go for the stoppage. But he did force it last time out against Antonio Moran, which will obviously serve him well as he moves up the levels, which I think this fight on Saturday night is a step up in levels, and I'm looking forward to it. But his skills are undeniable. I think you could make a case for him being the most skilled fighter at 135 pounds. Still some more seasoning needed in the professional ranks, I think, but maybe not that much.
Yeah. Look, we'll see. I just think it's exciting with him because we're not going to be here in a couple of years' time, and he's still kind of just at a certain level. I do think that it's gonna be a very big year from him. What can we expect from Andy Cruz in 2025, Danny? I think still at the start of the year. He's obviously getting out nice and early. But yeah, just had the 2 fights last year, had 2 fights in 2023. This is for an IBF international belt, whatever that means. But I know it's a tough one because of kind of politics and obviously when you've got the likes of kind of Gervonta Davis in the division where it's unpredictable what he's going to do. Vasyl Lomachenko, we don't know what he's really going to do next either. Those guys are kind of the champions. What can we expect from Andy Cruz in 2025, do you think? Do you think we could see him fight for world title? Do you think it's just going to be more about activity? Do you think we are more likely to see him in some sort of a final eliminator? What do you think we're going to see?
Just had a wee look actually before this video, and his best ranking is number 5 with the IBF. IBF's currently held by Vasily Lomachenko. Not really sure what he's going to do. There's been a lot of murmurs at his retirement. Not the number 1 spot, there's no one there. And then 2 and 4 are Kishan Davis, or sorry, Raymond Muratalla and Amara Abdulayev, and they're rumored to be fighting. And the number 3 is Keyshawn Davis, so it's getting very long-winded. Keyshawn Davis is obviously fighting Denis Berinchik, so that'll take him out of the mix. Um, so if Vasily Lomachenko does retire, you would imagine the winner of Muratalla Abdulayev will become either world champion or have to fight Andy Cruz for a vacant world title. So I think regardless of how it plays out, I mean, Vasily Lomachenko clearly doesn't have a great deal left. I mean, there's a lot of rumblings about his retirement, so that belt is going to become vacant at some point. And given the way the fighters above Andy Cruz are positioned, and depending on when the IBF planning on enforcing a mandatory, you could see him fight for a world title by the end of the year.
Yeah. Look, it's an interesting division, isn't it? But the way you've laid that out, I don't see a problem with that. I think it's definitely a possibility, and I don't see personally Andy Cruz having the opportunity to fight for a world title and kind of saying no to it, or his team saying no to it. I just think
You
he's
know,
that good. Think as well is like he turns 30 this year. He's not a young fighter, but he's not an old fighter. But I don't think there's not going to be too much, not going to be too much mucking around. Just got a couple more for you, Daniel. I'm not saying kind of I don't think this fight is going to happen. I really don't. But Cruz against Lomachenko, it would be an intriguing contest. If that fight did happen, this summer, would you back Andy Cruz to beat Lomachenko?
sure. I mean, that really would be one for your boxing nerds, arguably the two best amateurs of all time, fighting for a world title in the pros. It's difficult because Lomachenko, I mean, you hesitate to say he looked at his absolute best, but he looked very, very good against George Kambosos. And saying that how good really is George Kambosos, and it's quite a good style for Lomachenko, not the quickest to feet. And the comments I alluded to earlier and the rumblings about potential retirement and the seeming reluctance for fight against Shakur Stevenson, even Gervonta Davis, he didn't seem particularly up for it. I mean, if he's not up for them, which are very big fights, how up for a fight against Andy Cruz is he going to be? He would be physically bigger than him, probably punches a bit harder in terms of raw, one punch power at the weight. But Lomachenko, it's so hard to say. I mean, the Kambosos fight was only 7, 8 months ago, so an activity wouldn't be a huge deal. I think if it happened this summer and it was the version of Lomachenko that fought Kambosos, I think I'd probably favour Lomachenko still. I think it might be just a fight or two too early for Andy Cruz. But the longer the timeline goes on and the more fights Andy Cruz has in the pros, I think that pendulum starts to swing towards him and quite quickly too.
Yeah, interesting. Lomachenko about to turn 37, not been hugely active the last 3 or 4 years, and yeah, it's up for debate how impressive that win over George Kambosos was last year. All right, yeah, but we'll see. And look, as I've said, is it a fight that is going to happen? I'm not convinced, but we'll see. I'm hoping this is a really big year for Andy Cruz. I just think, look, he's been sold as someone who's going to achieve a lot in the sport, and I'm sure he will. But yeah, you kind of you want him to achieve really good things this year. Final question, Danny, what do you kind of see? What do you see happening here? Gamer's record of 20-1, beat Chris Colbert in his last fight, 14 stoppages. So like a lot of Mexicans have a hard KO rate. Um, what do you see happening here? I'm sure Andy Cruz is the favorite. But what do you see happening in this fight?
I think you'll have to work for it. This is a big opportunity for Gamez. I didn't watch the fight with Chris Colbert. I would imagine he was an underdog going into that fight. But he'll be really, really hungry at 25 years old. In saying that, you would have to make Cruz a massive, massive favorite here. As I say, I haven't watched a great deal of Gamez. You imagine he's going to try and bring the fight to Andy Cruz, which is only going to give Cruz opportunities. And I think there could be some, potential adversity, like we saw against Antonio Moran, but ultimately I think this fight probably ends in a Cruz stoppage somewhere around 7, 8 rounds again, I think.
Yeah, yeah, we'll see. Okay, well, yeah, nice.
What do you think? Before we go, can I have your
Before we
prediction for
go,
you?
I think. I think Andy Cruz is really impressive, and I think that game is clearly not a look. He's clearly not a bad fighter. I think if you're stopping Chris Colbert, I just think I know Chris Colbert's maybe not the fighter that he was supposed to be, but I still think a stoppage win over him is impressive. But I do think Andy Cruz is special, so I think Andy Cruz will win this fight on stoppage. But the thing that interests me in Andy Cruz is there's just so much hype about him. So is he going to live up? Is he going to be a 2, 3 weight world champion? If these big fights happen against Gervonta Davis, Shakur Stevenson, does he win those fights? So it's a big question. Like we all know he's very good, but is he world level? Is he elite level? Is he in a league of its own? Those are kind of the questions that I look forward to asking you because I'm not capable of answering them on another preview. But yeah, we'll see. Look, it's nice to get the ball rolling this year after what's been kind of a fairly quiet January. So we will see what happens. Danny, good to speak to you as always, and we'll speak to you again very, very soon.